Our text is from the 19th chapter of the book of Judges. And behold, there came an old man from his work out of the field at eventide. And he lifted up his eyes and saw the travelers in the street of the city. And the old man said, Whither goest thou, and whence comest thou? Like a silver thread running through the fabric of this whole history, like the refrain of a song repeated over and over again, stanza for stanza, this one recurring line tells the story of the book of Judges. In those days there was no king in Israel, and every man did that which was right in his own eyes. Other nations had a king. Israel did not have a king. Israel had never needed a king. Running all the way back to the days of Abraham, the father of the race, who lived in 4 countries on 2 different continents. His son Isaac and Jacob and his 12 sons never had a king. And the man Moses and the soldier Joshua, over all of the years and the many changing scenes of life, they had no king. And Deborah and Gideon and Jephthah and Samson, with their legendary exploits of heroism, never had a king. What they had was the living relationship with the King of Kings, the Lord God of their father. What they had was the invincible power of faith in the promises and purposes of God for them. God was for them the ultimate authority in life. The commandments of God would get them through this world with a measure of decency and honor. And the mercy and forgiveness of God would safely see them into the next world. But now all of that was gone. There was no king, no central authority, no law, no rule, no regulation. And what happens when every man does that which is right in his own eyes is the burden of this final story in the book of Judges. There is no editorial comment here in the margin. No notation, this is good and this is bad. The action is long drawn out, so much so that you think you're watching the actors in slow motion. But it sets the tone of the time, catches for you the mood and spirit in those days as nothing else can do. And it sets the stage for the horrors that are to follow. The unspeakable sexual perversion, bloodshed, brutality, and wholesale slaughter. Our text simply introduces us to a man who lived in the remote hill country of Ephraim. The man was a Levite who was to work the full-time service at the house of the Lord. The Levite had a concubine who was unfaithful to him, ran away from him, and went back home to Bethlehem. Concubines were sort of secondary wives, commonly taken from the women who were captive in war or from one who was considered at the level of a slave. Well, regardless of what you think or do not think about polygamy, a man could take a woman, but only as his wife. And her rights as a wife were recognized and carefully guarded by the law of Moses. Neither woman nor her child were ever to be denied food, shelter, or any other marital privileges. The lowest woman in the land, from the poorest family or a foreign nation, was never counted as a nothing. The betrothal price did two things. It showed the woman is worth something. And if you want her, you better be able to take care of her. But that's not so odd, for every father asks that when somebody comes courting his daughter. Has this guy got a job? Can he take care of you? Or does he think he's going to live on love? Or what is worse, tied still to his mother's apron strings, live off of the old man? Can't afford a wife? Children? The answer is no. Well, this concubine proved unfaithful to her husband. I suppose you could argue that he had been less than faithful to her, taking her on like excess baggage and second-hand goods, never taking her for the sake of the whole of her own self. Was he unkind to her, unfair and indifferent to her? He was certainly unloving, as we shall soon see. Things like this probably shouldn't happen, but they do happen. And they still happen in this old world of ours. Only we call them by different names, not concubines or mistresses today. Many a married person has two and many more sexual partners at the same time. And others only have them in progression and in a row. Then we've got the shack-up jobs and the folks plainly living together, using each other like some sort of erotic doormat, or the way dogs use fire hydrants, without any pretense of loyalty or fidelity or commitment, for better or for worse, in sickness and health, till death us do part. Yeah, but this man was a Levite, a clergyman. He must have known it was his job to know, to believe, to teach what God meant when he made the male and female at the beginning and said, therefore it is not good that man should be alone. And how God answered that longing within every human heart to love and be loved with someone to fit you and fulfill you, to complete you and complement you, and said, therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife, and they two shall be one flesh. Perhaps can never be a thing of perfection among us imperfect people as we are. But what else do you have that will compare to the wonderful design of God for us from the beginning? Nothing else works in your society, does it? And never shall work. No sexual experimentation, alternative lifestyles, substitutes, or perversions will ever take the place of the union of male and female, and all of the ties of home and family that go along with it. 4 months later, the Levite has a change of heart, decides to go after his wife, takes a team of donkeys along and a servant, and goes down to Bethlehem to bring her back home. He knows that blustering and threatening and fault-finding won't work, so he speaks friendly to her, assures her of his intention, and she brings him back home to meet her father. Evidently, the two had never met, but they hit it off famously and sit down for 3 days to some serious eating and drinking. Enjoy over the reconciliation, or to assuage the guilt feelings that both of them had for their part in the matter. On the morning of the 4th day, the Levite rose up early to head for home. When his father-in-law said, "Stay and have a bite to eat," and he did. And after dinner, his father-in-law said, "Well, why don't you stay the night and take off tomorrow morning?" And the Levite did. And early on the morning of the 5th day, the same scenario. "Why don't you have something to eat before you hit the open road?" And they sat down till late afternoon, eating and drinking. And the father-in-law says, "Stay the night with us. Almost dark. And get up early tomorrow and get on your way." This time, the Levite declined the invitation, got everybody packed and saddled up, and hit the road for home. You read this story with a growing impatience. These people simply can't get their act together. They can't do a doggone thing right. There is no purpose, no conviction, no determination in the thing they do. The guy's wife leaves him and he does nothing. 4 months later, he does something. A 1-day mission becomes 4 days and then 5 days. Determined to set out at the break of dawn, he doesn't get started till night is falling. They're so half-hearted about everything, with their half measures, half done, and nothing's right and nothing's wrong and nothing's good and nothing's bad, and nobody loves and nobody hates. Nothing to get excited about, nothing to fight for, and surely nothing to die for. And that waffling through life, this aimless, pointless drifting through life, comes from a lack of conviction. It is only faith that fortifies your resolve and that gives us the firm conviction that these lives of ours are infinitely worth living and they are important. And we have a part to play and better play it right. Because how many chances do you get? As the sun was going down, the servant suggests, "Let's turn in at Jerusalem and find lodging for the night." Well, the Levite turns down that suggestion on the grounds that a bunch of foreigners live there. It's where the Jebusites dwell. Just a small notice. How little they ever entered into the promised land. How they quit fighting for that which they once believed. How they refused to drive out the Canaanite nations. How Jerusalem, the key city in the belly button of the country, still belongs to the Jebusites. They press on farther down the road, about an hour, and they come to Gibeah, a small island of Israelites in a sea of Canaanite surroundings. With joy, they entered into the familiar Hebrew neighborhoods again, found their way to the city square and sat down. They thought surely they would easily find lodging for the night, but no one offered. Now, and it wasn't that nobody saw them, for the eyes were still watching them. And it wasn't as though they came into town like hobos, beggars, looking for a free handout. They had a couple of donkeys packed with money and supplies and provisions. At any rate, they figured that they'd just sleep on a park bench for the night. And it just so happened an old man coming out of the fields at eventide saw them, approached them and said, "Where did you come from? And where are you going?" Was the old man surprised that these travelers didn't know where they were? That they thought they could sleep in a city park in this city? "Come and stay at my house," the old man said, and gave this ominous warning: "But whatever you do, don't spend the night in the open city square." They appreciated the hospitality of the old man. They took him up on it, entered into his house for the night, unaware that those eyes were still watching. And shadowy figures were already surrounding that house on every side. And that deed of the old man is the last glimmer of goodness in an abyss of evil. That old man was to them the Good Samaritan, when so many others who should have known better passed them by. But one meets people like this in our city streets, don't you? Many beggars are crooks, of course. But there are genuine people, genuinely distressed and in all kinds of trouble. And who will help them as the crowds carelessly pass them by? What do you and I have to offer them? You mean the only thing we can do is refer them to the welfare department? Go down to social services. Check the Salvation Army. Get some government organization to help you. Christ pleads for our help, however small, trivial, insignificant it might be. Maybe like the old man, only you have the confines and four walls of your own home. He promised that anybody who gives so much as a cup of cold water to a thirsty child shall never lose his reward. And on the final day, the test will not be complicated. Very simple. Very practical. What did you do for the down and out, the needy, sick, forsaken, the lonely, and those who have lost their way? And Christ will count what you did for them as done for him. So his promise runs, inasmuch as ye did it for one of the least of these, you've done it unto me. Amen.